What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. So, of course, Rugby 2022 has been announced, or Rugby 22 as they've probably shortened it down to. It's really hard to not just say Rugby 20. I've been so used to saying it for like 2 years now. So with that game coming out, there are, of course, some things we want to see improved from Rugby 20, which is the best one to go off of because it's done by sort of the same people. So we want to see some improvement. So what I've done is I've sat down, I played a bit of Rugby 20, and I've come across some mechanics within the game that I think I'd like to see improve. So I've come up with a top 10 list, and what I thought we'd do today is just go through my sort of top 10 mechanic changes I think I'd like to see in the game. This isn't going to be things like it needs better graphics, or like the AI needs to be more difficult. Like, not sort of general broad things, but very specific things I would like to see an improvement. But I'm just one guy. Make sure you drop down in the comments what improvements you would like to see from Rugby 20 through to Rugby 2022, because I'm sure it will help the guys developing the game. It'll be really useful for them to get a bit of knowledge from their customers what they want to see. So in no particular order to these, they're just things that I've noticed while playing the game that I would like to have tweaked or changed a little bit. So starting off, let's go for the first one. The first one I got written down here is the way Lineout steals work. The Lineout system I was never a big fan of in Rugby 20. I actually much preferred the Rugby 2011 version, which was the World Cup, where basically if you picked the correct call of what the other team were going for, you always stole the ball. So, but there was no way to gauge what the other person was doing. It was sort of a 1 in 3 chance of you calling front, middle or back, and you'd be able to steal it. Rugby 20 mixed up a bit with that you could sort of always see where was going to get lifted by the way players ran. You could do dummy jumping, which was really nice, and I hope they keep that in. But you could sort of buy where the dummy jumpers were going to go, and you could sort of watch where players were going to run to, where the jump was come from. You just wait for it, and you basically get in, and then it's just a spamming of a button of who could do it more. And it brought around a few issues, because normally the AI couldn't keep up with you, even on the hardest difficulty, so you pretty much won every line out of theirs. Any of the multiplayer that we did play for a very short amount of time, pretty much based on your internet connection, who could press the button the most. It also comes down to who's just got that trigger figure, or, basically got a modded controller that allows you to press a button a bit quicker. They're always going to win. So I think there could be definitely a change there. The other thing I wasn't a big fan of is the whole slow motion thing. For anyone who's ever played rugby in real life, you'll know when you're on the pitch, there is not a lot of time for you to stop and think. It's pretty hardcore. It goes for the full 80 minutes when you're actually playing a game. There's not a lot of aspects of rugby where it feels slow, apart from if you're a back and some people are doing some pick and drives. But in a line out, this whole slow motion animation thing is something I've never liked in rugby, because I don't really feel it fits in well with actual rugby. You don't get to feel it slow down a little bit. So I would like to see them enhance that line out steal a bit more. Maybe if you get the correct call, it goes down to which jump has a higher line out stat, the likelihood of you calling it. Maybe occasionally you don't lose your own line out ball if they do call it correctly. Maybe you have to time when the jumpers go in the air, and if you can beat the time of the jumper to when the ball is thrown in, you get to steal it. I think there's a couple of options they could do there, so hopefully that'll be one thing they look to improve. The next one on the list for me is going to be the way that you stop mauls in the game. Mauling, of course, in real rugby is a really sort of overpowered technique. We see it a lot in rugby, that it's very hard to stop a maul. But in Rugby 20, it took it to a whole nother level. Things like stopping a 5-metre line-out that turned into a maul was almost a guaranteed try. I don't think I've ever successfully defended a 5-metre line-out maul against the AI. The AI sometimes actually do manage to defend against some of your mauls. I don't know why. Sometimes they enter one player and half the maul bar is taken down and they can defend it. But I would say 9 out of 10 times, if you get to that 5-metre with a penalty, you turn that into a maul, that's a guaranteed try. I'd definitely like to see a couple tweaks to this. Maybe the ability of they actually go off the numbers of who's got better mauling stats, is how well you can actually perform against them. The way fatigue enters, are players tired? Does that reduce the amount you can actually impact on a maul? Does it enhance the ability to actually attack a maul as a defending team? You don't really get to see mauls in these sorts of games drive backwards either, which is something that does happen in real rugby. They can start a maul and you can lose a good 5 metres before you walk forwards. So I would like to see some enhancements to the maul that allow you to actually stop a player's maul. One thing they did introduce in 2011 2011 in the World Cup game was a function that didn't work, but I quite liked the idea of, which was where you could click down an analog stick and you could actually manually collapse the maul. It didn't really work in that game because as soon as you did it, you immediately got a penalty against you. But one thing I would like to see is potentially the ability, not that you want to condone cheating in rugby, but it definitely happens. But I would maybe quite like to see the ability of when the referee's running around on the pitch, if the referee was somewhere else, maybe right at the back of the maul or on one specific side, you could manually collapse the maul on one side and the referee doesn't see it, and you sort of get away with the cheating, but also the ability is that you could collapse it, the referee could see it, boom, yellow card, penalty try. There could be all these added things, and I think that'd be a really interesting mechanic, especially for multiplayer, people trying to outsmart each other with a bit of cheating, collapse that maul. I think it'd be really fun to add in. The next one on the list for me is a create a pro sort of style thing. Basically being able to create a player. It wasn't something we got to have in Rugby 20. Of course, we got to have the ability to create a team. You could only create 4 teams. I don't know why it was limited to 4 and you couldn't just have like 15 if you wanted to. And there were nice customization options. You could do specific kits for your team. You could do badges. There were set badges and you could do sort of changing of colours. There were 3 different tier of colours. Again, even the badge system, I might have liked the ability you could have coloured in a little bit more in different ways rather than just 3 solid colours. But the ability to actually create a player, I think, would be fun. Add yourself into the game. Put yourself in a position. You could create a team of you and your friends. Design an entire team based of individuals you've made. You could add them in when you're doing the sort of club games where you create a club and you go on. You could add your own player in. You could play as yourself on the wing, scoring a million tries. I think that would be really fun. I'm sure it can't be too hard to add. A lot of games have the ability now just to customize a single player at a time, go through height, weight, you know, some different attribute stats, the visual look of you. I mean, you probably wouldn't look as good as some of the other players if they're going to go for a more photorealistic style with new graphics they're going to add, but I definitely think it'd be a real nice improvement. So hopefully they get round to a create a player mode. Next on the list is going to be decision making of the AI. There's something I would definitely like to get tweaked. Of course, we're not going to really go down the difficulty of AI. It's sort of known the difficulty in Rugby 20 wasn't necessarily the best. Even on Pro, it's very easy to still win and to win to nil. Really, it's not actually that hard at all. But the AI's decision making is something I would really like to see tweaked specifically. There are a couple of times where they make very bizarre choices, and I would just like to see a couple of things change a little bit here. So most of this comes down to kicking. For me, a lot of the passing and running play they tend to do actually works very well, but the actual kicking in almost every form is sometimes very bizarre. Sometimes they can be in your 22 and yet perform box kicks, and you just call the mark and it's over, and it's like, why would you do a box kick there? I've had teams where I'm winning 80-0 and it's the 75th minute, they get a penalty in my 22 and they kick for posts. Why are they having 3? Why wouldn't they go for a try? No team in the real world would just take 3. If you're 80 points down, you go, come on, we want to have a bit of respect here. We want to go out with a try. I would like to see them do that. And then finally, just the general kicking from hand. Sometimes the AI does incredible kicks where they hit the grass and the ball bounces all the way into that touchline. It's really good. But a couple of times you do see an awful lot in this game where the AI get the ball in hand, and if they're behind their own try line, they'll do a cross-field kick to someone else that's behind their own try line, which you jump in, you catch the ball, bang, you score a try. There are quite a few times where they can be on the halfway line and they just kick it dead, but not even like it's close, not even like it's close to the line. Like they kick it 5 meters ahead of them and 50 meters into the stands. So I think decision making for the AI would be a lovely improvement, but more specifically around the kicking, you know, deciding what's the best technique to do, what's the likelihood of gaining points, gaining territory, and how to best stop you as a player from being able to make the most of their mistakes. Next on the list is going to be the ability to play in different stadiums. Rugby 20 actually had quite a nice variety of stadiums. You could go from playing in some really big stadiums that I'm sure are meant to represent real world stadiums down to like park level where like there were just nobody watching you playing international games in someone's backyard basically, which is really nice. But one thing I would really like to see, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to see, is the ability to have actual stadiums, playing at Twickenham, playing in the Principality, playing in the Aviva. I'm sure people would want to see all of these actual stadiums happen in real world games. I'm not sure what happens with licenses, because I don't really understand the difference between if you could have Wales licensed as a team, why you couldn't have Principality stadium licensed? Because do they not go hand in hand? I don't know. That's more of a game developer thing. Someone might be able to comment actually on what the reasons are why those can't be done. But one thing I would really like to see, of course, depending on the ability for licenses to be gained, is the ability to have actual real world stadiums in the game so that you could play at home, play some big international fixtures, you could create your own World Cup playing in the stadium you want to. I think that'd be really nice. Moving on from that, another thing that I would like to see, again, this is going to be a bit more license dependent, is the ability for more teams that are in. Of course, we're going to have probably the sort of standard, the Six Nations teams. We've got a couple of the Six Nations teams already announced. We also had Japan announced, which is really nice to see. I imagine Wales will probably get in there. Scotland will get in there further down the line. I'm not sure how the licenses work out. But more specifically, the teams we couldn't have in Rugby 20, of course, we didn't have England, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. There's no Lions team, which I think would be really nice. Even if there was a non-existent Lions team, I actually think it'd be quite nice to maybe have a Lions team that didn't have specific players in, and you could create a Lions team, like when you're in the game menu, selecting a team, which player do you want? So you could go into each position, select your Lions team, that's who you wanted to bring. I think that could be fun, or just create that as sort of a setup that you could have generally, but then also use a real life Lions team. Of course, this will be closer to an actual Lions tour going on now, 2021, so they might even add that team in, but I think that would be nice. But again, a bit license depending on who they could gain, but I think it'd be nice to finish off some of those teams, especially someone like me who plays the game. I'm based in the Northern Hemisphere. I know a lot about Northern Hemisphere rugby. I've watched a lot of the Super Rugby Aotearoa, so I know a little bit about the New Zealand teams. But as you know, some of the players we get to miss out, a lot of the Australian, a lot of the South African teams, especially when I'm doing videos, when I'm doing previews of games, like it's going to come to this Lions tour now, I won't be able to do the normal standard thing where we have the players actually in the background playing a game while I talk about the real world teams. They have to sort of be made up teams and what have you. So hopefully that is something they could look into for Rugby 22. Next on the list is going to be a slightly refined pack opening system. I actually really liked it in Rugby 20. A couple of people weren't big fans of the pack system, but I thought it was really good. The ability to create a team, and then you basically spend the coins and the currency you earn when you play games from doing set things. You get to buy packs of players, you unpack them, and you can slowly build up a team from the players that you have. And I really liked that. It created a whole new different dynamic for creating a team. I'm thinking back now to like Rugby 2006, where you could create a team and they had transfer windows. I would maybe like to see that brought in a little bit into the actual club level thing, but that's something a little bit different. But the actual pack system itself, I did quite like the idea of. You could just build a team. But one thing I would like to see is it's slightly refined. For anyone who watched our Italian Six Nations series that I did, where basically I did exactly that. I spent 750,000 points on Rugby 20 to build an Italy team that took part in the Six Nations. And after 750,000 points, which is a lot of hours in that game, I still didn't have the complete team. I had to finish the video and I went on and played like another 4 or 5 hours of that game, generating some currency, and I actually managed to get someone to fit into the position that I needed, but it still wasn't the exact player I was after. So I would personally like to see it refined a little bit. I think they could keep basically the same system, pick a team, pick great players, superior players. You could have all the general sort of genres they have. But one thing I would specifically like is when you go into a team, if you want to go, let's say you want to buy an Irish pack, I want to buy an Ireland team pack, I would like to see when you click on Ireland, you get multiple options. So you can either have a forwards pack. That would cost you, 50,000 SP points in the game. It gives you 4 forwards at random, but at least you know they're specifically forwards. Helps you sort of condense down the options that you might be able to get the player you're after. You also have then backs. You could have 4 specific backs, but you don't get any forwards. But if you're after a specific back, you could have the random pack, which is basically what you have now. It's just anyone from any position filters in, helps you get that big booster for the team, but then also having the ability to pick a specific player. So it also costs you 50,000 SP, but you get to buy specifically Johnny Sexton. You want the kicker from Ireland. That was all you were after from that team, rather than having to buy 18 packs of Irish players over and over again just to have 17 copies of Andrew Porter or someone. You want the fly half. You can't quite get him because of how the system works. I think it'd be good, so that way you can either have forwards, backs, randoms, or one player, but it's all worth the same amount. So there's the sort of positive and negative of choosing one player, whereas you could get lucky, pick a backs, get Johnny Sexton, context and 3 other players for the same price. So I think that would be a nice little way to just sort of vamp up that pack system and allow people to create their own teams a little bit easier. The next one is a genuine mechanic in the game that I'd never quite understood since the release of Rugby 20, which is the speed of players off the ball. It was one thing that I noticed that I don't know whether it was a glitch or just something that might have been overlooked in the original design of the game, but when you play Rugby 20, players that don't possess the ball in hand actually run quicker than players with the ball in hand, and I don't really know why. I can never make up whether it's a genuine speed thing or whether they don't have a stamina bar when they don't have the ball in hand. So when you're playing the game, I created my own Wales team. I spent a lot of time on it. I slowly increased the player's stats, and I got a Josh Adams who had a speed of 90 something. He was incredible. He could run quicker than anyone. But I have played games where that Josh Adams character has been chased down by props, by number 8s. Everyone's been able to chase him down and tackle him, even though he's like maxed out in stats, and in real world rugby he's probably one of the quickest rugby players out there. And I think it would be nice to see the ability to have that shifted up a bit. There's also a little exploit in the game where if you do a grubber kick on and 2 players are running, whichever player you highlight as actually runs slower than the opponent's AI chasing it. So the exploit for that is to kick the ball through and immediately change to a different player, allow your own AI of your team to run at full speed quicker than their player, and then swap back to them just before they pick up the ball. So there's definitely a weakness in there. I don't know why players that don't have the ball in hand can run quicker and don't run out of stamina, but that is something that I'd definitely like to see change, but that'll probably just be a bit more of a mechanical tweak that might have just been missed in the design of Rugby 20. On to the final 2, and the next one is going to be again another sort of internal game mechanic. I think there should be a real negative impact on a player for being put in the wrong position. When you play Rugby 20 and a player gets injured and you don't have someone to fill that position, of course you can make a substitution, you can take them off, and you can put a new player on. Now, one thing they did add in to injured players is you immediately see the effect on an injured player. They run slower, they fatigue quicker, they bounce off more tackles, their passing can go down a little bit. So the negative is immediately in there. It makes you want to take that player off. So when you make a substitution, and I've had a couple of situations where I've done this, I've had like an injured scrum half, and in my created team I don't have a replacement scrum half, so I've just got to put anyone in there. So my example for this one is going to be that I've had it a couple of times where I've swapped in someone like George North has gone into play as a scrum half, and there's been no negatives. When you actually make the substitution, you get a little warning marker, and your player's rating drops by 10. But apart from that, it seems to have almost no effect, and sometimes it can even work as a bit of a positive. You know, if you have, let's say you had a scrum half get injured in the 80th or 75th minute when there's real fatigue is kicked in, your players begin to slow down, you put in your centre or your winger on at scrum half, you can then pick up the ball from a scrum and just run, and you pretty much outrun every player. There doesn't seem to be any real negative by putting a player in the wrong position. You can chuck a prop in scrum half, you can chuck a winger in a hooker. It doesn't seem to matter other than a player's rating. Nothing seems to get worse. So that's something I would really like to see, is if you have to put a player in a wrong position, you see all of their stats begin to struggle a little bit. You know, passing could go down a little bit, the kicking, box kicking. If you put like Liam Williams in at scrum half, his box kicking is incredible. But I don't think I'd give Liam Williams a box kick at any time. So it would definitely be something I'd like to see. Putting a player at a wrong position actually really hinders all aspects of their game, including their decision making, the passing going on, and in fact impacting the AI a little bit more would be nice. There's a couple of times where I've seen AI swap players into wrong positions and they don't seem to have any negative effects, or the way they play doesn't change at all. Chucking a prop on at scrum half and they have also got a really high passing and they just carry on it as if you didn't injure your scrum half. So that would be one thing I would really like to see change, as a real negative impact on if you have to put a player in the wrong position. That way it really has to try and make a diverse team who can move into different positions and cover multiple areas. And the final one for me is going to be the ability to design your own set plays. Now, I have no idea how this would really work, but I just think it'd be really cool. Rugby 20, of course, introduced the sort of variety of options you got to have in different set plays. A lot of which work really well and were really fun to use, some of which are almost unusable. I don't know why. Some of them, the way you have to pass and the timing of the passes means that AI is able to tackle you long before you're able to complete the set play. Sometimes you complete set plays and players drop the ball. Sometimes they go a little bit wrong. But one thing I would really like to see in this game now is the ability to create your own. And I think that would be really where you get to see a difference in player ability. Some people would, of course, use just the general set plays, but if you play the game for a lot longer and it's getting a little bit boring using the same set plays, you get to a little bit of a higher tier, you're a higher level, you get the more sort of professional players of the game that want to get into it a little bit more. You could design your own set plays. Maybe you have a starting point when the ball is here, and you have 3 players here, and you could say, first pass goes right, and when this pass is complete, where should these other 2 players be? And you could create a list then of where you wanted them to run, and that way it gives you options to create it in the real game. I think it'd be really nice. Rugby Challenge 4 tried to catch up a little bit with different set plays. From what I've seen, the set plays aren't quite as good as Rugby 20, which did have really interesting set plays, being able to do loops and stuff. But the only thing for me was creating set plays that were already default, that when you ran them, the AI were able to stop you from doing them. The crossfield kick was a bit of an issue for me. There was never really like a decent crossfield kick that you could do more reliably to get it to. It always went really too far, too short, just no one be able to catch the ball. The AI beats you to the ball more times than not. So something I would really like to see is the ability for you to create a set play where from a ruck or a scrum, you could position all of the players, and on each completed pass where the next player should be or attempt to run to, and that way you could actually create your own set plays. But I think that'll be fun. So that's my top 10 list of mechanics I want to see change for this game. But again, I'm just one person on the internet making wild calls about rugby. So if you're a gamer, if you enjoy rugby games, make sure you drop down in the comments your own things. What makes you want to play this game? What changes do you want to see? What enhancements do you want to see? Do you want to see different mechanics change? Is there anything specifically you want them to keep the same? You don't want them to change at all. Maybe you love the Lineout system. You don't want it to change. Make sure you drop it down in the comments, because I'm sure it really helps guys that are making this new game make a better game for all of us. They get free advice from their actual customers. These are the things we want to see. They don't need to do bug reports and beta reviews and stuff of everyone having to give them information. They can just go on a video in their spare time on their own lunch and watch a video like this and just read through the comments and say, that is a good idea. We'll try and see if we can add that into the game. I think it's really useful, and it helps us get a really good game of rugby at the end of it, and that's what we all want at the end of the day. I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys. Make sure if you've enjoyed this video, you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel just to keep up to date with all the latest videos as they come out. I'll see you all next time, guys. Bye-bye.